Okay.
Hi, thank you. So, where are we? We're in the wrong place. Great. So, in the year 2000, I found out about solar flares while I was doing some research. And like most people who find out about solar flares and solar mass ejections for the first time, you get very excited. And these are huge explosions from the sun that throw stellar matter into space. And this stellar matter can disrupt our ionosphere. We use the ionosphere to bounce radio signals around the planet. And this gave me the idea to create a work that responded to the sun. The idea was to create a radio feedback loop, circumnavigating the globe, feeding on itself, a kind of global reverb with a self-sustaining life. The radio signal would eventually be disrupted by a huge solar storm created by solar mass ejections of the sun. If one big enough hit, it would kill the feedback loop. Now, to this day, I have no idea if a work is possible such as this. But since then, I've been researching about the sun with a dream of one day making work that will describe the physics of the sun or react directly to its presence. So these interests led me to make the application to the ESA Ars Electronica Future Lab Residency, which I'm really ecstatic to have won. Everyone says to me, "That's amazing, congratulations, what does it mean?" And they don't really know what the European Space Agency is or what the residency involves. What it means is I'll be going to spend 6 weeks here, which is the European Space Agency Technical Center. It's where they build everything, it's where they have all their ideas and their development. And I'll be spending 6 weeks there with their physicists and engineers researching the projects. And then it's followed by 1 month at Ars Electronica Future Lab, developing the project with technical experts. And I've also been told that I'm going to go here at the German Control Center during the Mars EXO landing, which is pretty phenomenal, and I'm kind of blown away by that already. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I do. As an artist, I make sculptures and installations, films, performances, photography, and I work with many types of materials, but mostly I work with explosions and bombs. And I've worked with powerful plastic explosions that are very forceful. This is a piece of mine, one in a series of metaworks, where I ripped through sheet aluminium or copper or steel with a military detonating cord, which is basically C4 in a rope. It's very, very powerful stuff. This is, so for example, the shockwave that travels from this kind of explosive travels at around 8,000 meters a second, to give you an idea of its power. But I also, to a lot of people's surprise, make some very delicate work. This is a work which somebody gave to me. I often invite people to bring me objects to explode. This is a photograph somebody submitted of them and their mother. And I blew tiny little kisses with gunpowder onto the surface. They're just a few centimeters high. So really, the poignancy lies in the way that it's used. And I also combine the explosives with other changing materials. This is scorched. It's a work 26 blocks of ice threaded with fuse. And I threaded it live at an exhibition. So I set the blocks up and I slowly threaded it, letting people watch me. Then as it burned, I set a light to it, and as it burned, it scorched a three-dimensional drawing through the ice, connecting all 26 blocks together in one piece of art. When the ice melted, the drawing disappeared forever. It's just a couple, this piece, for example, relates a little bit to global warming. And I'm not going too much into the concepts of the work because I don't have so much time. It's just to give you an idea of the techniques that I'm using. But the project that I applied to the residency with is Starstorm. And the idea behind the project is that I'll use the research from ESA about the physics of the stars and our sun to design what I hope will be a very powerful and poetic explosive performance, or a series of performances, using a range of explosive materials, from the very small to the very large. And each explosion will represent a specific process taking place every moment in stars all across our universe. So what kind of physics? Composition, life cycles, magnetic behavior, light production. It could be anything, and it's really hard to say, because until you get there and you start talking and interacting and seeing what they're doing, it's really difficult to know what's going to trigger you and inspire you, and what's communicable as well. But to start off with, I'll just give you a few examples of things that I'm really interested in. So at the moment a star becomes a star is when it reaches hydrostatic equilibrium. The moment the nuclear fusion inside the core is, the pressure is equal to the mass, the gravity, the weight of itself, its own mass. And once that happens, it's a perfect balance. It's a self-entity, and it's self-regulating. And then another thing that I enjoy doing with my work is to imagine that I'm a particle, or I'm the matter that I'm working with, almost anthropomorphizing its existence. So here's the solar flare, or solar mass ejection I was talking about earlier. Perhaps I can tell the story of the day in the life of a particle traveling through the solar terrestrial atmosphere, starting at the core of the sun, hurtling through space, reaching the magnetosphere, finding its way into the ionosphere, and eventually contributing to the northern lights. What would that journey feel like if it was from the eye of the particle? And also working with explosives, I'm naturally quite interested in this moment, this tipping point, which is a very specific moment of change. It's not gradual, it's instantaneous. There's all or nothing and nowhere in between. So it's found with chemical titrations, flash floods, detonations. How can we bring attention to this moment of change? How is it created in the context of an explosive performance? Now, it doesn't necessarily take a lot of energy to ignite an explosion. Sometimes you just need a few batteries. So how could we use the energy? How could we build the energy slowly and measure that moment, that tipping point? Could we use solar energy, for example, from the sun to create an explosion that describes the physics of the sun? Could we use the audience to trigger the ignition using energy from our bodies? How many bodies would we need to do that? Could we use the heat and huddle together? So this is also where Electronica Future Lab comes in, because I'm not really technical. And I know that sounds strange, working with explosives, but it's a very raw material, and my technical ability within that is very much plugging it in and pressing a button, kind of. So this will be really great working with them in this respect. So I don't really know what these performances are going to look like or feel like. This really will be determined by the experience and the research at the residency. But what I do know, I feel, is that I'd like to take the audience on a journey, to feel the heat on their faces, to be overpowered by the smoke, to be surprised at how meditative and gentle it can be, and be really exhilarated by how heart-stopping and all-encompassing it can feel. And all the while using the explosives to reflect the patterns of the universe we live in and the discoveries we've made about it. That's it. Thank you.